Hello, friends, and welcome to the show. So, breaking news from Georgia: Senator Warnock under investigation for voter registration misconduct. Top line, the Georgia State Election Board voted unanimously Wednesday to move forward with an investigation of U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock for his role serving as board chairman of a voter registration organization founded by Stacey Abrams that election officials say failed to follow deadlines and what appears to be the latest legal step in the ongoing feud between the progressive Abrams and the state's Republican election officials. Key facts: Warnock served as chairman of the board for the New Georgia Project in 2019 when election officials claimed misconduct took place. Under Georgia election rules, voting registration organizations like the New Georgia Project have to submit completed voter applications within 10 days they are received from the voter. But officials alleged during the 2019 registration effort, some nearly 1,300 applications were submitted to the Gwinnett County Elections Office after the 10-day deadline. The board voted 3-0 to refer the investigation to Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr, with the board's lone Democrat joining Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. What a punk, a B, in abstaining from the vote. Warnock did not respond to requests for comments from Forbes. Warnock resigned his position with the New Georgia Project on January 28th, 2020. Chief critic: today's state election board meeting was the first time we heard about the allegation regarding NGP's important voter registration work from 2019. New Georgia Project CEO Nsé Ufot said in a statement, "I believe that's how you pronounce it. We have not received any information on this matter from the secretary or any other Georgia official." So I'm getting sick and tired of Democrats saying that they haven't or that they don't know the misconduct that they're conducting until they're told about it by the news. It is getting really old. I'm old enough to remember when Donna Brazile denied feeding questions to Hillary Clinton until there was leaked evidence that she provided debate questions to Hillary Clinton. So it's kind of disgusting. I'm getting sick and tired of Democrats going, "Oh, I didn't know. I greenlit the assassination of an American teenager in Yemen. I didn't know we were giving guns to the cartel to kill Americans and police officers. We didn't know." No, you do know. You just stop playing ignorant. Surprising fact: election officials in Georgia have become well known for their dismissal of former President Donald Trump's baseless claims. I guess it's not baseless anymore, Forbes. Perhaps you should editorialize a bit less of widespread voter fraud in the state. On Wednesday, prosecutors in Fulton County announced a criminal probe related to a phone call Trump made to Raffensperger, where Trump said he needed Raffensperger to find votes. So I'm going to do a separate video on that in the next couple of days. So basically, the punchline of that is when Trump was asking Raffensperger to find votes, he wasn't asking him to find Trump votes. He was essentially just asking him to find fraudulent Biden votes. He was saying, "Hey, there's no reason why some of these dumps are just they seem mathematically improbable, right?" So to say nothing's impossible, but you can say something's improbable when you say, "Hey, it is highly unlikely for this to occur." Yet every time something highly unlikely occurred, it only swung in one direction. So perhaps we should take a look into it and see how many votes were actually fraudulent, which isn't an unreasonable request. He's not asking them to magically find 12,000 Trump votes. He was asking them to find 12,000 fraudulent Biden votes, which is a distinction, but is an extremely important distinction. But what I also think, getting back to the subject about Senator Raphael Warnock, something I believe that's actually happening is I believe the Republicans are setting him up to where they have to remove him from office. So, in the 14th Amendment, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So, basically, it gave everybody citizenship. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. Right? So that's section 1. Section 2 is what's important. and I'll tell you why. I have it highlighted. If you're on YouTube, you already see what I'm talking about. Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive and judicial officers of a state, or the members of the legislature thereof, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime. Right? So if what Senator Raphael Warnock did was a crime, then he can't be a senator. And then a new senator will be appointed up until the new election. Kind of like Kelly Loeffler, I believe that was her name. She was appointed as senator, and then she was beaten by Raphael Warnock during the next election cycle, right? So Raphael Warnock could get yanked for having committed a crime because he would be ineligible for office, and then the Republican governor would appoint a new senator. So I'm interested to see how this would be how this would kind of break down. So, except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced to the proportion which the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. So, I think Georgia is playing 4D chess right now. And people aren't really tracking this. And this has gained zero traction. People are worried about or talking about, this Section 4 thing with Trump about his incitement. He didn't incite anything except for the erection experienced by Chuck Schumer on the floor of the Senate. Jumping over to Paul Sperry reporting, breaking Democrat Senator Amy Klobuchar just misled CNN viewers by claiming that President Trump, in his January 6th Ellipse speech, told supporters to go to the Capitol and go wild. Transcripts show Trump never said such a thing. In fact, Trump encouraged supporters to go peacefully. So I have a question for Twitter. I have a question for YouTube, Google, Facebook, all these social media platforms. Will Amy Klobuchar receive the Trump treatment? Will she be silenced? Because guess what? Spreading misinformation like that is only stoking the fire. You are lying to the American people. CNN should be banned for allowing people like this to spread misinformation on their platform. Because guess what? Trump supporters have been shot in the street. You saw videos of Trump supporters getting their hats ripped off their head and getting punched in the face. So you see these crimes being committed, groups of people being persecuted for their beliefs, right? And it's disgusting when you have lawmakers lying about what they say, what they stand for, what they do, how they're being threatened. And then they go, oh, well, that's just the exception. It's like, no, if a Trump supporter started punching Biden supporters in the face, it's going to make a national news cycle. And basically, you'll see what you're seeing on January 6th, but also you don't see what's happening in Portland or what's happening in Washington State right now on CNN because it doesn't fit the narrative. The Orange Man is bad. The Orange Man created ratings. These Antifa people, these BLM people, these Joe Biden supporters who have been burning down cities for an entire year, that is nothing less than domestic terrorism, of violence and threats with the sole purpose of creating a political change is domestic terrorism. Yet they don't call it that. They call it activism. They call it protesting. They call it fiery but peaceful. It's bananas. This doublespeak, this gaslighting should be criminalized because guess what? All it's doing is leading to more violence. Let's jump over to all sides. Biden holds first call as president with China's Xi Jinping, reported by Axios. I tweeted, Xi Jinping, sir, I would prefer the lube, but if you want, you can just spit on it. Hunter made millions from the CCP, and now Joe is undoing Trump's restrictions on CCP influence. Fun stuff. So, if you enjoy tweets like that, you can follow me at Not Censored Yet on Twitter. President Biden on Wednesday evening held his first call with Chinese President Xi Jinping since taking office, raising thorny issues including human rights in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. The big picture ahead of the call, senior administration of officials offered reporters the most detailed portrait to date of Biden's policies towards China and how they will build on and diverge from Donald Trump's approach. Driving the news, President Biden underscored his fundamental concerns about Beijing's coercive and unfair economics practices, crackdown on Hong Kong, human rights abuses in Xinjiang, and etc. But it doesn't go far enough because there's things that Biden is doing that is questionable. I'm not going to say it's, I'm not going to lay out some conspiracies, but it's definitely questionable, right? So it is well documented his son has received money from the CCP. So his son receives money from the CCP. Joe Biden now becomes president. His son still has stake in this company that is also owned by the CCP, which is also highly questionable, right? It definitely raises ethical concerns, right? Conflicts of interest may arise because the CCP is well known to make people disappear. So if Joe Biden doesn't do what the CCP wants him to do, his son could be disappeared for doing something criminal, which he is most likely doing with his organization in China. So it would stand to reason that Joe Biden's policy decisions are being affected by his son's unscrupulous business dealings in China. It would stand to make sense. So instead of basically saying we're going to pause certain restrictions that the Trump administration put in place, we're going to undo them. We're going to allow China access to our electrical grid. We're going to, there was one other thing with China, the Confucius Institute. That's right. So basically, Trump, towards the end of his administration, said we're going to ban universities or force universities to disclose how much money they receive from China. So basically, we can keep track as a government of Chinese propaganda being spread in the United States and potential theft of intellectual property. So if you didn't know, China has a nasty habit of investing in some of these lead scientists in some of these lead research institutions, paying them millions of dollars a year basically for a carbon copy of whatever was produced while they were researching whatever, right? Because they want that information, but they don't want to do the work. It's better to just be a tick on the dog's back and just let the dog do all the work. The Hill reports the Mandalorian star booted from the film studio after social media post. The studio behind The Mandalorian says it severed ties with star Gina Carano following a series of abhorrent social media posts from the actress. They were not abhorrent. Distasteful if you're woke, for sure. But I mean, what's wrong with the difference of opinion? If you're so afraid of what she has to say, or if what she said was so wrong, then perhaps correct it. But nobody corrected it. They just said, a lot of people were just saying, well, as a Jew, I'm offended that you would equivocate the treatment of conservatives with Jews in the 30s. Well, you know what, friend? You're not really disproving what she's saying. You're just saying that you're offended that she would equivocate the two. So you're not saying she's wrong. You're saying that it hurts your feelings. It gives you the sads. And guess what? Stop being so sad. Gina Carano is not currently employed by Lucasfilm, and there are no plans for her to be in the future. Nevertheless, her social media posts denigrating people based on their cultural and religious identities are abhorrent and unacceptable. So I feel like she has grounds for a lawsuit because she didn't denigrate people based on their cultural and religious identities. I feel like she should sue for libel. In an Instagram story post a day earlier, Carano, who played Cara Dune on Disney Plus Star Wars spinoff, reportedly compared the current political climate to Nazi Germany. Sharing a post from another account, Carano wrote, Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. So she didn't even post it. It was essentially a retweet. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first had their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? The year-old former mixed martial artist said. Another since deleted post appeared to question the use of face masks during the coronavirus pandemic, showing a photo of someone wearing multiple coverings all over their head with the caption, "Meanwhile in California." Sorry, I had to cough. Many social media users condemned those and other posts calling for the actress's firing before Lucasfilm's announcement that had parted ways with Carano. The transphobia, the racism, being anti-masks in the middle of a global pandemic, the anti-Semitism. Gina Carano is sick and should be fired. I thought cancel culture was not a thing. Let's see what she said. Honestly, I haven't even looked at this. Let's see. Oh, because she said boop, bop, beep. That was her gender identity, which I don't really see the problem in that. She said America does not have systemic racism problem. America has a violent leftist extremist problem. Oh, she liked the tweet. She didn't even, oh my goodness. You are more likely to be assaulted for being a Trump supporter than your race in America today. And she liked that too. So basically, that's obviously a problem because she liked a tweet. Meanwhile, in California, so it's the image. So if you're not watching on YouTube and you're listening to the podcast, it's the image of somebody wearing probably about 10 of those surgical masks wrapped around his head with his eyeglasses on top. And the last one was the Jews on the streets being beaten, and it's a lady basically running down the street in lingerie. I love Mandalorian, I really do, but she has to bed fired. Oh, but she's apologized. That means nothing. Oh, tell that to Nick Cannon. All right, people, I'm sick and tired of this. She is a hateful, transphobic, racist, anti-Semitic person. She is spreading harmful and vile messages. That's weird. What part of because she posted, well, it's impeachment day again, because apparently that's so with the Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. Apparently, that is something. Fire Gina Carano for unabashed anti-Semitism, transphobia, open support of sedition, insurrection, and COVID denial. This is ridiculous. I thought cancel culture wasn't a thing. I don't understand. You can't have it both ways. One standard. That's all I ask. And if this is considered anti-Semitic just by saying, how do you think the Nazis were able to round up the Jews by the thousands? You have to create an environment where even their neighbors or kids hate the Jews. You have to make it to where they're being beat in the street and nobody wants them around. That's all she's saying, was the government created an atmosphere, created an environment so hostile to the Jews that when the Nazis came in and rounded them up by the millions, nobody said anything. Nobody stood up to them because they thought the Jews were the problem. That's what she was saying. And basically going, hey, there's a lot of similarities between how the Jews were treated back in the day and how conservatives are being treated today. So here's from historylearningsite.uk. Once in power, Hitler used his position to launch a campaign against the Jews that culminated in the Holocaust. Hitler blamed the Jews for all misfortunes that had befallen Germany. The loss of the First World War was the result of Jewish conspiracy. The Treaty of Versailles was also a Jewish conspiracy to bring Germany to her knees. So remember, everything that bad that happened in the Obama administration was George Bush's fault. Everything that's currently happening bad in the Biden administration, which is essentially everything, it's all the orange man's fault. So no matter what we do, friends, it's always the Republican president's fault. It is never the fault of the Democrat leadership. The hyperinflation in 1923 was a resultant international Jewish attempt to destroy Germany. So basically, when inflation hits, because Joe Biden wants to make it rain, baby, it's going to be Trump's fault because he destroyed the economy. Never mind the fact that wages increased more in 3 years than they did in 8 years under Obama. During the time when the Weimar Germany was seemingly recovering under Stresemann, what Hitler said about the Jews remained nonsense listened to by only the few. Hence his poor showing at elections prior to the 1929 Depression. During the impact of the Great Depression, though, when people became unemployed and all looked hopeless, Hitler's search for a scapegoat proved a lot more fruitful. Sound any like there's any similarity between 1929 depression and COVID-19? After January 1933, the Jews became the Untermenschen, the subhumans. Nazi thugs stopped Germans from shopping in Jewish shops. By 1934, all Jewish shops were marked with a yellow Star of David or had the word Juden written on the window. SA men stood outside the shops to deter anyone from entering. That was not necessarily a violent approach to the Jews, but was to come later. But it was an attempt to economically bankrupt them and destroy what they had spent years building up. So I don't know if you remember a news story a couple months back, but there was, I believe it was in Cincinnati, Ohio, there was a Cuban restaurant owner who BLM wanted him to sign a social contract. And he was like, hey, look, I came from a communist country. I want no part of your organization. And they said, you know what? If you don't sign this contract stating that you are going to hire this many black people, you're going to have this many black people in management, you're going to do X, Y, or Z. We're going to set up shops in front of your shops, basically stealing business away from you. We're going to keep people from entering your business. Their tactics in 2020 sounds an awful lot like the SA troops in Germany. It is bananas. On buses, trains, and park benches, Jews had to sit on seats marked for them. Children at schools were taught specifically anti-Semitic ideas. Jewish school children were openly ridiculed by teachers, and the bullying of Jews in the playground by other pupils went unpunished. If the Jewish children responded by not wanting to go to school, then that served a purpose in itself, and it also gave the Nazi propagandists a reason to peddle the lie that Jewish children were inherently lazy and could not be bothered to go to school. So, what's going on in school right now? If you are white, you must repent for being white. If you are middle class, if you're upper class, it is your fault. You stolen from somebody else. It is your fault that your family is successful at the cost of somebody else's. It is your fault. You need to repent for being white. This is getting ridiculous. And if you complain about going to it, it is because you are a fascistic white supremacist. You can't get out from under these people's thumbs. There is a lot of similarities between what happened in Nazi Germany and what is currently happening right now through the woke culture. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed. The Jews lost their right to be German citizens, and marriage between Jews and non-Jews was forbidden. It was after this law that the violence against the Jew really openly started. Those that could pay a fine were allowed to leave the country. Many could not, and many shops refused to sell food to those who remained. Medicines were also difficult to get a hold of, as chemists were not allowed to sell to Jews. So I see with this whole domestic terrorist push that's going on with conservatives, if you voted for Trump, you're going to be labeled a domestic terrorist. They're already talking about that. They're going to make your life extremely hard to live. The campaign against the Jews stopped for a short duration during the Berlin Olympics, and then 1938, a Nazi diplomat was shot by a Jew in Paris, which created Kristallnacht. So remember, Kristallnacht was not one day. People talk about the January 6th riots as being Kristallnacht, and I have to disrespectfully disagree. That was just honestly, to quote MLK, I believe riot is just the language of the unheard, right? So this Kristallnacht, on 10 November, the campaign started. 10,000 shops owned by Jews were destroyed and their contents stolen. Does that sound familiar? What happened throughout the entire year of 2020? Shops were destroyed. Things were looted. Billions and billions of dollars of damage occurred throughout the United States, and it was sponsored by one party. You had the now Vice President of the United States funding the bail for people looting and rioting. This is bananas. Do not claim something to be true when it is false. This is far more similar to the Antifa movement than it ever is anything close to a MAGA movement. Prove me wrong. 10,000 shops owned by the Jews were destroyed and their contents stolen. Homes and synagogues were set on fire and left to burn. So when Antifa go into Josh Halley's house with his wife and kid in there, what happens if they would have burned down the house with them in there? What happens when Antifa goes to people's house and starts harassing them? And then when they pull a gun out, basically saying, "Get off my lawn, people. Leave me alone." And they say a gun. Then they call the very police that they're protesting, the very police that they say are fascistic. And then the police go and arrest the homeowner. And he's like, "What the heck is happening? I have 50 people outside my house shining lights into the house, screaming at me in the middle of the night, and you arrest me?" Far more similar to what the Jews had to go through in Nazi Germany. I'm sorry. The fire brigades showed their loyalty to Hitler by assuming that the buildings would burn down anyway, so why try to prevent it? So, when they said, "Why even board up your windows? It's gonna happen anyway. Why send the police? The crime is going to happen anyway." A huge amount of damage was done to Jewish property, but the Jewish community was ordered to pay a 1 billion mark fine to pay for the eventual clear up. Jews were forced to scrub the streets clean. So the business owners were ordered to fix everything. The business owners were forced to clean everything up. The government is not held responsible for their inaction. And this is what really starts to tick me off. How are you even creating some sort of parallelism between what happened on January 6th and the MAGA movement and World War II? This seems far more similar to the tactics used by Antifa throughout the course of last year. And it's something to keep in mind. Don't let people lie to you. I'm not going to say don't be a sheep, but don't blindly listen to what you're told, right? What is it? Trust, but verify. But I'm also going to say this, and it's going to be highly controversial. Basically, don't trust anything anybody tells you, at least from a news organization. Look up several sources. I tend to look up several sources, find as many direct quotes as possible. Better yet, if I can find an actual speech, that's probably going to be the best way to find out what somebody said. Because when you take one sentence out of context and then editorialize based on that sentence, it's going to create a lot of issues. It's going to drive a narrative. So, kind of like Trump with the good people on both sides. If you listen, the sentence before, when he says, "Except for the neo-Nazis and white supremacists, there were good people on both sides." But they cut out that first part of the sentence and say, "Well, there were good people on both sides." So, of course, these people are going to drive narratives. You have to verify what you're told because there is so much incentive in driving a wedge in this country, and people aren't understanding that. So, I'm going to drop a couple more videos today. Until next time, I'll see you then, friends. Later. Bye.